Miami season starts off in about a month, and you have questions about your team, so we open up the mailbag and talk about some potential trades, Duncan Robinson's potential mindset entering training camp, and which team is Miami's biggest rival. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat, however you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I am David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're opening up the mailbag as we're in between news regarding Kevin Durant's decision not to go anywhere, I guess, accepting that he's going to be with the Brooklyn Nets, at least in the foreseeable future. Nothing happening yet with Donovan Mitchell, who we'll talk about a little bit later, but we're also going to be answering some questions about this Miami Heat roster, including which 5 players might be the best to bring with you for a potential bachelor party. So that should be a really good question, but we'll start off with this question that comes from our good pal Pete. He writes in, "Hello, David and Wes. I keep hearing about our thirst for Donovan Mitchell. Our team is so guard heavy and lacks a power forward. Myles Turner has to be a higher priority, which also allows us to keep Herro. Turner and Bam also allows us to easily start Herro and to pay him. Trade Duncan, Gabe, Yurtseven, and 1 draft pick for Turner and pay Herro. Depot will be the next 6th man of the year, and Caleb can go back to being the free safety while Dedmon can cover off nights. Next offseason, we will have even better tradable assets. The Pacers can send Duncan, Yurtseven, and Buddy Hield to the Los Angeles Lakers, presumably for Russell Westbrook, now that they have Patrick Beverley on that roster, another potential Heat target at some point. At least there was a rumor that the Heat would look after Patrick Beverley, but not really an area of need. So let's focus on the question from Pete West. What do you think, first of all, about our thirst for Donovan Mitchell and the fit for Myles Turner on Miami's roster?
Yeah, let's start with the Donovan Mitchell part of it, too, because the Athletics' Tony Jones reporting this morning that the Jazz have obviously been in constant communication with the New York Knicks about trading Donovan Mitchell there, but that also the Brooklyn Nets and the Miami Heat are potential landing spots for Donovan Mitchell. So this is one of those, nothing against Tony Jones here, and I don't mean it this way, but it's sort of one of these non-report things, and it's sort of making the rounds this morning. And it just feels like it's a leverage play. Basically, within the story, Tony Jones himself reports that Miami has nothing that interests Utah in terms of matching a package for Donovan Mitchell, and that Brooklyn can't really make that deal because Donovan Mitchell and Ben Simmons can't play together. And I guess that begs the question,
it's
why
a
not
weird
just
story
trade?
overall.
It's
like,
weird.
It's based. It's built
Simmons,
off of according to a source, Donovan Mitchell, if he had a preference, would prefer these 3 teams. It's like, but 2 of them can't really offer anything of interest.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, all right, these are 2 teams of interest to Donovan Mitchell, but not of any interest to Utah. And it kind of sounds like the Heat have maybe moved on from the Donovan Mitchell thing because not because they don't like Donovan Mitchell, but because they recognize they just can't compete with even the worst Knicks offer, right? Like a middling Knicks offer is better than anything Miami would be willing to offer. Of course, it would not include Bam Adebayo in any kind of trade like that. So, yeah, I just think that this is a leverage play. I think that given that the Knicks and the Jazz have been in constant communication, this is just an effort by the Utah Jazz, Tony Jones, the Utah Jazz beat reporter for The Athletic, getting his information from presumably the Utah Jazz, an effort from the Jazz front office to just basically wring as much out of the Knicks as possible. Sort of the final touches on any sort of trade negotiations. Can we get this extra pick? Can we get these protections lifted off of what was offered? Can we get this player instead of that guy? Whatever. I think it's basically a point. We're at the point now where it's a matter of when and for what, and not if Donovan Mitchell gets traded to the Knicks.
That's a good point. If anything, like that's a deal that could fall apart. Like either they're going to send him to the Knicks. That's my feelings, that they're either going to send him to the Knicks or they're just not going to trade him at all because they're not going to get what they want.
Well, that was also in the report that they're comfortable, quote unquote, comfortable going into the season with Donovan Mitchell because they're going young and Donovan Mitchell is young.
Right. So
I don't buy that for a minute. By the way, there's no way they bring Donovan Mitchell back. He's getting traded to the Knicks. I just don't see that I just don't see it not happening.
I just also don't think that there's been enough of a public push, and I don't know if it's just Mitchell not understanding how the game is played or not willing to tarnish his image to the same degree that James Harden and even Jimmy Butler have in the past, like making a public trade request.
I mean,
Like if he went out and said, "Look, I've got this list of teams," and he definitively said, "I want to go to these teams, make it happen." Why not? But he's still trying to play both sides. I think he's trying to, kind of make things easier for him. Although from what we've heard, Utah fans are not particularly enamored with Mitchell. They'd rather move on and not have him on the roster at all. That they much more lamented the departure of Rudy Gobert than Donovan. So
I just this isn't based on Donovan Mitchell's trade request. This is sort of different than the Kevin Durant thing or the James Harden thing or the Ben Simmons thing over the last few years. Like the Jazz are just clearly hitting the rebuild button. They don't believe Donovan Mitchell is sort of that top tier A1 guy who you sort of just build around. They want to kind of hit that reset button and get younger. And it sounds like Donovan Mitchell's just like, okay, like I get it. It kind of felt like he was always going to leave Utah anyway, but he never requested the trade. This is sort of Danny Ainge and Utah's front office sort of getting ahead of it and maximizing his trade value now, which is why I think they make a move now versus, okay, what are you going to do if you're Donovan Mitchell? Yeah, maybe you could average 30 points on a bad team for a year, but teams aren't stupid. Like they know that those are sort of inflated numbers. Donovan Mitchell is still, a top 30 player by any measure and one of the best 20 young prospects, one of the best 15 young prospects in the league. Like I think that's whatever. In terms of the Myles Turner thing, I like the trade idea that's laid out here. I do wonder if now that the Kevin Durant thing is over, at least for now, and that Donovan Mitchell is not a realistic option for Miami, do they start to repurpose their assets that they were otherwise holding on to in case of a Kevin Durant deal, right? Duncan Robinson's big chunky salary, that might have been something you had to send out to get Kevin Durant, right? So now that Durant's off the table, does that provide more clarity to this front office? And they say, you know what? Maybe we do go after a Myles Turner or just, again, building off of this question, a Harrison Barnes, a John Collins, somebody like that who fills that position of need as a starting power forward or center or whatever. Can we go after one of these players now that we know we don't have to hold on to these assets for Kevin Durant? Or does this front office say, you know what, it's only a matter of time before the next superstar comes available, and we have a question about that later on, too, in this mailbag episode. But so let's hold on to as many of those assets as possible still, meaning like the first-round picks and stuff like that. I can't imagine that you get Myles Turner without including the pick to the question to Pete's question here. You probably have to include a pick. I like the fit of Myles Turner. Absolutely. I just don't know that Miami is convinced that Bam Adebayo is ultimately a power forward because Myles Turner can't play power forward for you. He has to play center. And so I wonder if you go into this season and say, let's experiment a little bit with Dwayne Dedmon and even Overmar Yurtseven as a combination in certain lineups with Bam at power forward and one of those traditional centers at the 5 and just see if it works, sort of as like a beta test run. And then maybe by the deadline, if Myles Turner is still in Indiana and they're still willing to move him, maybe by the deadline we make a move if like that first beta test goes well enough where we say, well, let's get a vastly superior player to those guys in exchange for some of those assets because we think that maybe Bam's future is at power forward. But it's hard for me to imagine the Heat committing to Myles Turner. I know he's on an expiring deal, but the idea would be if you trade for him, you would re-sign him. You don't want to lose him for nothing after a year and move assets for him. So if you're committed to getting somebody like Myles Turner, then that means you're committed to playing Bam at power forward, and I just don't know that the Heat are there yet.
You're right. Having said that, I think it would be a fantastic acquisition. Like, I hate the discourse around Turner because so much of it is disingenuous or at the same time coming at from a completely different angle. This is a player who was drafted very young on a Pacers franchise that has been very unserious over the last few seasons because they just can't seem to figure out who they want to be. There was the trade, for Victor Oladipo. There was the Domantas Sabonis acquisition, on both of whom came from the Oklahoma City Thunder in exchange for Paul George. Like, they've just been rebuilding and retooling and then firing Nate McMillan. And they just can't seem, they had that coach, I can't even remember the guy's name, who was there for a half season, basically, and lost the locker room immediately. Rick Carlisle, probably not able to connect with the roster the same way that the Pacers would like them to be able to connect. But either way, like Pacers, I think like even the talk about Turner and his love of Legos, like can't the man have like a life outside of basketball?
Are people criticizing his Lego? I didn't realize the criticism.
They think he's unserious about basketball, and it's like you have to realize
like the Joel Embiid, Shirley Temple thing. Like who cares, dude?
Until he becomes an MVP candidate in a couple of years, and everyone's like, oh,
Myles Turner
kind of
won't.
Overlook that sort of
But he's a good player. First of all, he's a good fit for if you're just like checking boxes of what Miami needs. Miami got a good rebounding team, Miami, not a good shot blocking team. Myles Turner, a good rebounder, a good shot blocker, and obviously if you're gonna pair exactly a good 3-point shooter, a very good 3-point shooter for his position. If you're gonna pair Bam and move him over to power forward with a center, Myles Turner is sort of the prototype. And
3 and B.
So I like Myles Turner. I'm with you. I think the trade would be a home run if they were to do it and not have to give up a whole bunch for him. I just don't know that Miami is there yet. I like the idea of experimenting with Dwayne Dedmon lineups because he's sort of like a poor man's Myles Turner, isn't he? A guy who can make some 3-point shots, a good rebounder, a physical presence in the middle. Let's see them experiment with those lineups with Dedmon at the 5, Bam at the 4, and see if it works. Because Bam is that's your cornerstone. That's your franchise player, right? You got to maximize him first and foremost. So if you think he can take that next step as a power forward and not as a center, then you go ahead and find that ideal center who would maybe be something like Myles Turner.
Well, let's move on quickly here to wrap up our first segment. This question comes from Rodrigo via YouTube. He writes, don't know if Collin Sexton has been discussed, but he might be a Heat-made star, and Pat Riley calls him Mini Jimmy, so there's obviously something there. I don't remember the reference from Riley calling Sexton Mini Jimmy, but I think a little bit of that is overstated. Again, I think as a smallish guard, there's not really a need for him. There was some discussion about Sexton before the acquisition of Kyle Lowry last year, and certainly about, regarding overlooking the emergence of Gabe Vincent last year, Victor Oladipo as well being part of this roster, Tyler Herro being here. Like, there's just no real need for Sexton at this point. I like the idea of him as a young player that's kind of defensive-minded and also aggressive offensively. He's not a great shooter. I just don't see the fit, and I don't see that you're going to be able to pry him away from the Cavs, who I think would probably just match any offer Miami could make.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Riley can like Collin Sexton and compare him and call him whatever he wants, but not necessarily want to have him on the roster, right? Like, you can like other players who are on other rosters. So just this whole the reporting around this executive likes player is just kind of out of whack to me and way overstated. Anyway, it's like, Pat Riley, do you like Giannis? Yeah. Does that mean that Pat Riley's, Giannis is probably a bad example because he actually did try to chase Giannis. Anyway, I'm with you. Collin Sexton, I like Collin Sexton. I just don't think he's a fit for Miami, and given what you would have to give up for him, and this idea that just because him and Cleveland are working out this contract dispute that you can get him for nothing, also makes no sense. Why would Cleveland do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Collin Sexton, 23 years old, 6'1", 190 pounds. The last year he only played 11 games. Because of injury, but the year prior to that, 2020, 2021, 24.3 points per game on 47.5% shooting, 37% from three-point range, 81.5% from the free throw line, 3.1 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Tyler Herro, a year younger, 22 years old, 6'5", 195 pounds. Last season, 20.7 points per game, so a few points less, but on a better three-point percentage. He shot about 45% overall, almost 40% from three-point range, was a better free throw shooter, 87% almost. 5 rebounds, a better rebounder. 4 assists, about the same. And then 0.7 steals. Collin Sexton, I think, was 0.8 or something like that. So roughly the same. Yeah. You're leaning into Tyler Herro. You can't afford to mess around with Collin Sexton. Maybe there's a world where you could pair Tyler Herro with another young guard. It doesn't, just because you have one doesn't mean you can't have the other, but you have Kyle Lowry in place. And I would be okay, like, if you were going to start thinking about the future, putting a young guard like Sexton next to Tyler Herro in your backcourt, if you believe that Tyler Herro can get much better defensively, because we know that that's not going to be the case for Sexton just because of his size. Tyler Herro actually has the height to be a pretty average defender probably at best, but neither of them are a true point guard. Both of them are sort of combo guards anyway. So you already have your young sort of combo guard scoring first guard in Tyler Herro. Let him be that guy. You don't need Collin Sexton, and you don't need and you don't need him given what it would cost to get him. You have other needs that you need to fill.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, we'll continue opening up the mailbag to answer some questions about what happens if the Clippers season doesn't go as expected. But before we do that, just a reminder that BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league from Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, of course, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. And just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. And be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review, or to send in great questions like this one, who will answer quickly, from Philip. Who would you want on your team, playoff Jimmy or playoff Reggie? Now, we assume, Wes and I, that Reggie is in reference to Reggie Miller.
Could be Reggie Jackson. Because that's some big games for the Clippers in the playoffs.
He could. We'll be answering a Clippers question later on, but I don't think Reggie Jackson is the one, unless you're talking about the Yankees playoff Reggie Jackson, Mr. October himself.
I'm going with Jimmy, but I'm going with playoff Jimmy, and I won't even argue the merits. I won't even argue the stats. Reggie Miller annoys me. I don't want him on my team. Jimmy Butler.
As a player, he annoys you, or as a broadcaster?
Both.
Okay.
I don't like him either way.
Wow.
No. Give me Jimmy Butler. Come on, man.
All right. No, I look, Reggie is a great shooter. Certainly kept things interesting during all those matchups against the Knicks and the Bulls during the 90s. A great run there at the same time. It was kind of a one-way player. I think you have to go with Jimmy Butler, to be 100% honest with you.
I just don't need him in the playoffs telling me afterwards, reporters, that was a Kodak moment. Like, get out of here, dude. I don't need any of that. Also,
but he's not going to tell you that as a player. I mean, that's him trying to come up with a voice as a broadcaster, man. Like, as a player, he was telling Spike Lee that that the Knicks were choke artists. That's good stuff.
He had a little bit of an edge, but I think also part of
8.9 seconds. 8.9 seconds, right? Isn't that the 9 points in 8 seconds, right? I mean, come on, dude.
9 points. It's like, part of me is biased. My dad grew up a Knicks fan and basically instilled upon me not to be a Knicks fan. I was raised a Heat fan.
I should hope not.
But instilled upon me to not like Reggie Miller, so that's probably part of it.
So do you hate Michael Jordan too?
No. I mean, no. Come on.
Okay.
It's Michael Jordan.
Well, I mean, Jordan much more lethal than Reggie Miller ever was.
Reggie Miller much more annoying than Michael Jordan ever was.
I am also a listener of the Long Shot podcast, and I think all the trade talk is getting a bit to Duncan. He is a bit of an overthinker. What do you guys think? Well, Philip, I have to agree with you. I think there's no way. I know NBA players are programmed to telling you the same party line over and over again. It's the business of basketball. It's nothing. You control what you can control, etc. Having said all that, there's nothing that worries them more than the constant trade speculation. Like it makes things so much more difficult. Players, like most human beings, crave stability. They want to have a stable front office. They want to have a stable coaching staff, which is part of why I was kind of hinting at with Myles Turner. It's like that whole Pacers situation has been really difficult for a lot of players. For Duncan, similarly, when it comes to the just yearly inclusion in trade rumors, that's difficult. Plus the pressure of the salary and the new contract and everything else like that. You can dismiss it, you can overlook it, you can even publicly decry it, but at the same time, there's no way where it doesn't impact you, because you're all of a sudden expected to do a lot more than what you were doing before. The bread and butter that got you that big contract in the first place. So absolutely, I think as an overthinker, as somebody that puts that pressure on himself, as somebody who has publicly talked about I forgot the imposter syndrome.
Right.
Things of that sort. Like he's also told me that it's kind of overstated, that he is confident in himself. Like, you don't get to the NBA without having incredible levels of confidence, but there is a pressure that you put on yourself to prove to everybody that you belong at this level. And I think he still puts that pressure on himself in great amount, and that the contract certainly helped. The trade talk certainly challenges that every day. So I think, yes, the pressure is getting to him, and I think he'll find a way to respond this season. Having said all that, I think he finds a way to bounce back.
I don't like the use of the word overthinker, and it's sort of in the same line of sensitive, because it's just inherently negative.
Well, you can't get out of your head.
Bad
thing. I think that's I think
but
we're
acting like this is the first guy to go through a shooting slump. Like, that's what a shooting slump is. It's being in your own head. It's the mechanics being just a hitch off or something. That's what it is. Duncan Robinson isn't the first player to go through a shooting slump. But by the way, slump, he still shot like 37%, 38% from three-point range last year. He just wasn't top 1% of the league elite anymore. And that's the difference. But this idea that he's like an overthinker and somehow it's a detriment to his game, just, I don't know, man. Like that, I push back against that notion. It's like how people, look, I disagree a lot with what Kevin Durant does, but people calling him sensitive as if it's a negative thing. It's like, what? You shouldn't be cognizant of what people are saying and how you're feeling. Like, that's somehow a bad thing. I don't get what weird standard we put these athletes, hold these athletes to where they just got to be like basketball playing robots. I just don't get it. And so, yeah, was he in his own head last year a little bit? Of course he was. But again, he wasn't the first player to. We're acting like he was the first player to ever do that and be through a shooting slump. It's fine. I'm with you, man. He'll bounce back. He'll be all right. Second year of the big contract, a full offseason sort of back up, regroup, whatever. I think he's still one of the best shooters in the NBA. He shot fine last year, not in an elite level. I think he'll get back to that. This training camp is really huge for Duncan Robinson. I will say that. And that if he is going to be cognizant of something, it's that, yeah, if you want rotation minutes, you're going to have to earn them in training camp. And there's going to be quite a bit of pressure on his shoulders when camp opens up. But this is a guy who went from Division II all the way to the NBA. He's dealt with challenges before, bigger than this one. It's just a unique one. And I'm with you. I think we'll see a bounce back.
All right, well, we'll take a break here, and we'll talk a little bit in the next segment about Montrezl Harrell, whether or not he's an option for Miami, what happens with the Clippers if their season goes bad, and which 5 Heat players you would want to plan out your bachelor party. All that here on Locked On Heat. All right, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're continuing our mailbag episode, and this question comes in from longtime listener Billy, who writes in, should the Heat consider Montrezl Harrell for the 15th spot? I'm not paying the bill, so screw the luxury tax concerns. Here. Signing Harrell is an upgrade at the 4 over Caleb Martin. The Heat go all into maxing the offense, and it won't really impede the whale hunt. So Harrell, a free agent at this point, but there are, of course, extenuating circumstances for him. He was arrested in Richmond, Kentucky, in possession of 3 pounds of marijuana, just a little light smoking over the weekend for Harrell, and a court date, thanks to the journalistic integrity and resources of Mr. Wes Goldberg, determining that Harrell has an upcoming court date set for next week, August 31st.
Right. A little backstory on that. Originally, that court date was set for mid-July, which had that been done, that I think it was like while we were in Vegas for Summer League, while Summer League was going on. Had that been done, Montrezl Harrell would have a lot more clarity. The reason Montrezl Harrell is unsigned is because people don't know if he's going to be going to prison, because the felony charges that he could be charged with carry up to 1 to 5 years of prison time, and so people just don't know what his situation is. Why you're not going to sign him? That original court date was pushed back from July to mid-August because of some sort of scheduling conflict with the courts in the county. And then it was pushed to like August 10th, I think. And then there was no reporting around this at all since 2 weeks ago. That court date clearly had not happened. And so I just went onto the county records and looked, and it's due for August 31st is his court date. So it was pushed back again, evidently. And so maybe we'll get more clarity at that point. I probably not. You're not going to get the day of that. So I think this is a situation that could obviously go into the regular season as we try to get more clarity as Montrezl Harrell's.
But is he even a fit, though?
He is a fit. I like the fit a lot. Just with that in mind, I think there's quite a few teams that would like him. I think Brooklyn has been linked. The Lakers have been linked. And he makes sense for Miami. He's not. I know that people say he could play power forward and center. You would prefer him to be playing the 5 for you. But I think if you have somebody, he's undersized at the 5, just like Bam is. But if you have somebody as versatile as Bam, I think Montrezl Harrell could still sort of be a fit. He's got an interesting little mid-range float game. Really aggressive rebounder, which I like for the Heat specifically. Not much of a rim protector, but defensively you can switch out onto the perimeter a little bit and do some things. He's a decent ball handler. It would be a unique front court pairing. It would basically be 2 small ball 5s playing together in the front court. But given Miami's other options, that might, as unique and maybe strange as it would be, it also might be the best version. Might be the best option for Miami in the front court too. So I think it's something that they could kick the tires on. The problem with it, again, is the Heat already have 14 players under contract with Udonis Haslem coming back. They don't want to go to 15 players because that would basically thrust them into the luxury tax. And that's something that they're trying to avoid because they anticipate being in the luxury tax next year. And then that would trigger the repeater tax, which is not something that they want to do. So would you have to waive a player in order to bring in Montrezl Harrell? And given that the fit is a little questionable and clunky,
I think it's worth it.
It probably wouldn't happen, right? They probably would not make that kind of investment.
I mean, I like the idea of him. Again, like you said, the aggressive rebounding, the fact that he can't put the put the ball in the basket. If it's around the rim, I don't necessarily trust him from more than 5 feet out.
Yeah.
You like the spirit, you like the pluck, but a lot of that is kind of empty calories too. Like he was effective in spurts here and there, but I think he wore out his welcome in Washington. He wore out his welcome in Los Angeles. Like
Clippers, yeah.
you're only getting or with
and
Lakers too.
And the Lakers, yeah, both teams, yeah.
There's a reason why he's traded as often as he is. It's just because defensively he's not very good. He tries maybe, or at least makes it seem like he tries, and so that kind of masks a lot. But he doesn't move his feet well. He just kind of gives up position. I don't know that he's necessarily as good a fit too, especially if you've already got Bam, clogging up the middle to some degree. And you need Jimmy in order to get to the rim as effectively as he does, and you need Kyle to be able to get to the rim, etc. And you already got Herro out there too. Like you need a floor spacing big, which is why PJ Tucker was as good as he is. I don't think you want Herro shooting from the corners the way Tucker was, nor is he quite as capable of putting the ball down with that floater game either. So anyway, I just don't think it's going to happen.
It's one of those classic things where the name is there, and maybe you're a fan of the player, you like the player, but then. I was already against it when we went into this show, and the more you and I have just talked through it, I'm like, yeah, there's no way it's going to happen.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on with this question from Max Marshall, a longtime listener and supporter of the show as well. If the Clippers flame out early in the playoffs again, could you see Miami calling for Paul George or Kawhi Leonard? I'm going to go with no on that one. I think both of them have kind of written the script for themselves. I think George in particular has gone from beloved in Indiana, carrying that franchise, welcoming him back after his incredibly terrible, traumatic injury, then trading him to Oklahoma City and saying, I want to be there, and then trading him to Los Angeles yet again. So, like, he's gone through this already. He's back home in Los Angeles. I think he's happy there. He wants to play alongside Kawhi. I think they're in it for the long term at this point. Like, if George was going to express some kind of desire to be traded elsewhere, wouldn't have happened over the last couple of years when they were kind of just waiting things out and trying to figure out what was going to happen with Kawhi. Now that they're looking like championship contenders, I think even if they fall short, I think they would probably run it back the following season. So my feeling is that neither of them want out of Los Angeles, although I'm sure Miami would be happy to inquire about both of their availability. I don't think either of them are going to be available.
It's a really good point by you, right? Like, if Kawhi or Paul George were going to leave, it feels like that would have already happened while Kawhi was dealing with the injury last year. And if Paul George just felt like, I got to carry this team, this is not what I signed up for. But yeah, like, they're legit contenders this year. And I'm not the biggest Kawhi guy as like a leader of a basketball team. And just his overall sort of availability and accountability.
That's Reggie Jackson. That's playoff Reggie right there. That Reggie Jackson, I think, is the emotional leader of that team.
He's the heartbeat of that team, which is like, all right, good, I guess. Good luck with that. But I really like that team because they're really deep and things like that. So I don't see that sort of flame out happening necessarily. But also to the point of the question, will Pat Riley call if they don't meet expectations? Yeah, he'll probably call, but I don't anticipate any of them being traded, and certainly not to Miami probably. So.
Is that your sleeper pick for a title, or at least representing the Western Conference?
A sleeper pick, right? The Clippers. I feel like a lot of people are picking them. My sleeper is the Nuggets. I feel like people aren't really recognizing, especially when you look at the odds on BetOnline. Like, you can get them at like plus 1,500, plus 1,600. So
nice plug. Well, you've got one last question to wrap up today's mailbag episode. Let's get to it.
All right, I'm really excited about this. So my bachelor party is coming up, which I'm very excited about. But I'm also excited to ask you this question. So when kind of thinking about your bachelor party, you have to think about, obviously, who do you want to invite, what kind of people are playing what roles, where are you going, who needs to do what, who has what responsibilities and jobs and things like that. So I was thinking, like, if you were planning a bachelor party with the Miami Heat players, who would fill sort of those roles that are just needed at every bachelor party? So first of all, you have the bachelor, the number one role. You need to have a bachelor at a bachelor party. So we're going to decide which Heat player is the bachelor, and we're going to go with the other roles too. You need a planner, the best friend who's able to, but also somebody who you trust and to put together a night or a weekend, right? So you need that as well. You need just sort of an anchor, the anchor to the friend group, sort of the friend, the mom of the team mom, somebody who could just at the end of the night take care of things, order the Ubers, make sure everybody gets through the McDonald's drive-through, and all these things. Like, you need the mom, you need the anchor. A wild card. You got to have a wild card. somebody who's just you never quite know what they're bringing to the table, but you know it's going to be exciting. It's going to keep the party going, and they're fun, right? Kind of a life of the party kind of person. And then you have a middle, and you came up with this name based on a recent Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry David felt like he was a good middle of a table. And it's sort of the same thing on a broadcast, right? You want like an Ernie Johnson in the middle who could facilitate conversation from Shaq to Charles Barkley. You need a middle. Nice. So who would be a good middle? So we got a planner, we get the Bachelor, the planner, the anchor, the middle, and the wild card. So let's start with the Bachelor. This is the party that this is being thrown, for whom it's being thrown. Who would be the best Bachelor? Who's most like the Bachelor on this team?
My pick is Bam Adebayo. As a Bachelor. He's young, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, kind of stable, good family guy, talks well about his mom, obviously a huge influence in his life. But also kind of, I feel like I'm sure he knows how to have a good time. I know he can get to it when he wants to. At the same time, I can imagine him just wanting that kind of stability, finding a good girl that reminds him of his mom and wanting to just kind of settle into a nice life now that he's the centerpiece of the Miami Heat future. I like Bam Adebayo as the groom.
I like it. I'm a little jealous I didn't think of him. I've got Tyler Herro just because he's sort of recently married and maybe he just never got a chance to get around to his bachelor party. Oh, no, he's not married. They're not married, right?
Not.
So, no, they have.
That's why I didn't pick him, is that he's like 3 steps ahead. He's got child number 2 on the way and a long-term girlfriend, kind of on and off again. But anyway.
Yeah, I went with Tyler just because, maybe that's sort of the next step is sort of the idea. He's also, like with Bam, he's young and you kind of just need like a young kid who needs a little bit of guidance and needs to have a good time. Bam's 25, Tyler Herro's 22. Either one of them, I think, makes the most sense as the Bachelor. Who's the planner?
With the planner, I went with the old head himself. I went with Udonis. I think that's a guy who knows everybody. He knows where to get the best deals. He knows where to get the best girls. If you're planning like something a little bit more wild, back in the day, he probably ran King of Diamonds. I'm pretty sure he could get anything there, and I mean anything there. Having said all that, you probably want that guy who also has a good connection. Like he knows the best restaurants. I know he could start off with a nice place there. He has a nice place of his own, I'm sure, where you can start off with a good liquor selection, a nice array of cigars.
He's getting you into Story. He's getting you a table there. He's getting you into Live. He's getting in you, and he's getting the private table and the good one, not like the bad ones.
Yeah. I think he's a right choice. He knows enough. He's at the same time he's got his voice. He's connected to the streets, as he likes to say. He still have a heavy influence there. He's still a man of the streets. And I think he's the kind of guy that you'd want arranging that kind of a party. But also cultured enough to say, you know what, we could go elsewhere. We could take a trip here. I talked to Mickey, and he's going to give us his private jet so we can fly to X. That kind of thing. Like, he might not have the money for it.
Bimini.
Right. He can do it. Why? Because he's Udonis. And who's going to say no to Udonis Haslem?
I like it. That's who I had as my planner as well. I had a backup that I just wanted to give a shout out. Gabe Vincent.
No.
Gabe Vincent so the planner is also usually sort of the best friend, right, of the Bachelor. And I've said this before about Gabe Vincent, but you ask, like, if you just poll like the Heat's locker room and you ask who's your best friend on the team, I feel like 50% of the team would say Gabe Vincent. And so that's
why Gabe Vincent is my middle.
That's your middle.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
He is the middle of the table. He's the one who can talk to everybody. If you invite Duncan to your bachelor party, he can chill with Duncan. You invite Dwayne Dedman, he can talk to Dwayne Dedman. And know he's going to be carrying the conversation. He knows what to talk about. The 2 psychologists. I mean, that's psychologists, I think. I think there's so much there that he can connect with. He can keep that party going. Yes. He's an interesting cat. I think he's just be a lot of fun to talk to at the same time. I think
connect is the right word there because he knows so much about everybody on the team. He's like, Duncan, you said this. Actually, that's something that like Tyler.
Oh, that reminds me.
Yeah, exactly. About. Like that reminds me. And he could just play the middle. Gabe Vincent's the correct answer, and I'm glad we're kind of going down the right road. Udonis could also be a really good middle, just for the record. Like I think if somebody else were to be the planner, Udonis is cultured enough. He knows so much. He could be a middle as sort of like like a storyteller. Tell me more about the years with Dwayne Wade and LeBron and Chris Bosh and stuff.
That's
like
a good point.
He could facilitate like campfire type conversations that way.
I think he'd also be like a little bored. Like, he's a little old head. He don't play the video games anymore or anything like that. So at one point, he'd be like, man, I don't really care about this conversation. And he'd just kind of leave you.
He wants the planet. He's the puppet master. He wants to get he doesn't want to sit in the middle of the table. He wants to get the private table, sit in a chair at the end, and just sort of observe his creation and be happy
his
with
boy
it.
Bam is getting married. He wants to take care of him, etc.
Is he a tequila guy, Udonis? I think I've seen him drinking like the 901 stuff or whatever, or not.
I thought he was a whiskey. I thought he was a whiskey type dude.
Is he a whiskey guy? Whatever.
Whatever
he's sipping on, something on the
whiskey
rocks.
and cigars, but that would be my guess.
Oh,
so who do we have
sounds
left?
Like I need to invite Udonis to my bachelor party. Whiskey and cigars.
Who do we have
so we still have a wild card and we still have an anchor. Also, well, I'll hold it. Let's go anchor next. There's only one right answer. One.
Okay, I kind of waffle on this one, but I think Duncan might be your anchor. Kind of boring, maybe a little bit too much of a wet blanket.
Wow.
But at the same time, I think
Duncan wants to get after it. Duncan's got to let loose a little bit. He can't be the anchor.
He's got a girlfriend.
No,
he's got a girlfriend. I don't think
you can have fun with a girlfriend. Like, it's just
not at a bachelor party. You don't. At least I don't think so. I mean, maybe your bachelor party's different than mine.
I don't want to. I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to put Duncan as the anchor because he needs to let loose a little bit. We're not going to make Duncan Robinson the anchor. He needs to just have a good night. It's Kyle Lowry.
That's a good one.
Kyle Lowry.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
He lets the boys have their freedom, and at the same time, kind of brings them back. He says, "All right, slow down." Yeah, I could see it. He's a floor general. He's seeing it all happen. He knows exactly when to let them loose and when to pull them back. I get it. Totally.
When somebody needs an assist, somebody needs to get a bucket, maybe for a little bit of puke in that case, like you throw up into a bucket, like he could do it that way. I don't know that this has been reported before, but Kyle Lowry was the player who organized the entire Bahamas trip on the cusp of the playoffs last year for the Heat.
Would have been a good planner too, then, right?
He would have been a good planner. I thought about him as planner too, but I just don't think that he knows. Like we're talking about the Miami Heat, I don't know that he's like Udonis is the right answer. Like Kyle Lowry would have been a good planner, but Udonis is the correct answer. But so then, I think he's the mom of the group. I think he's the anchor. He's the responsible one. He gets everybody the hotel rooms. He makes sure that everybody's back, has the room keys, gets back just in time. Like I said, you go through the Taco Bell, the McDonald's drive-through late at night to just stave off the hangover for the next day just a little bit and things like that.
I think they could do a little better than McDonald's. That's I'm just putting that out there.
Do not ever say you could do better than McDonald's. I won't stand for that. It's my favorite restaurant. Wild card.
Jimmy Butler.
Correct.
Like, I think that's the only answer. Like you never know where you're getting. Where you're going to go to a winery. You're going to get like a trip of a coffee place.
What's he
going
bringing?
to Italy. You're going to the Caribbean. Who knows? Like you never know with Jimmy. Oh hey, I got his tickets to go see Real Madrid or something like that.
Right,
it could be anything. It could be a soccer
the guy
match.
That shows up with extensions, and you're like, where did those come from? Like he's a complete wild card.
Yeah, and he shows up with extensions for everybody too. A hairdresser, like everybody gets their own private hairdresser. It's like, okay, I guess.
Can you imagine the Bachelor Tyler Herro wearing those extensions? I mean,
yes, I could, and that's sad.
Actually, yes, I could. Jimmy Butler is the wild card, absolutely, no question about it. Yeah.
Bachelor party. Hell, it's also. So you're like, I talked to my boy Mark Wahlberg. We're going to go out to a premiere. Then we're going to fly to Japan. This is going to be like a week-long Bachelor trip, and I think it's necessary.
That's the wild card, right? They kind of just keep kickstarting the party, right, all night. Once it feels like it's dying down, he comes up with something. It's like 1 a.m.
Yeah. Hey, you guys want to go to Russia? You ever had vodka in Russia? And it's like next thing you know, you're in a private jet.
Yeah, there's a PJ outside. You hop on, you're in Russia. Maybe not now, but. Like next thing you know, Mark Wahlberg shows up to the party, and you're like, "What?"
Right? He's waiting.
What was it
for
like?
you
What was it like filming The Departed? And, like now you have like a whole conversation for the rest of the night. Like it's good.
And then Gabe kind of carries the conversation. Right. Udonis by that point is like, "I don't need to plan shit. I'm fine. Everything's all
The Departed." Says Gabe Vincent is there was a psychiatrist in that movie, and my parents were psychiatrists, and just keeps going.
Let us know if we're wrong or off base, because I'm curious to hear your all thoughts. But I think we nailed it. To be 100% honest with you, this is the kind of question. So it just makes me sad that you're not a member of the Miami Heat, so you can't have these kind of guys.
Too. Now I'm like less excited about my own bachelor party. This one sounds way more fun.
You need new, better friends. You need the Miami Heat. Sorry, no.
I needed to befriend to the Miami Heat. You're right. That's my problem.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to make your second listen Locked On NBA. Latest news and rumors about the NBA, and whether you want to know about Donovan Mitchell or if you want to know what's going on with Chet Holmgren's season-ending injury, etc., and so much more. Make sure to check in with Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
I bet that be.